Hello. So it has been a little while since I've posted a video. First, real quickly, apologies for that. Work has been just insane, as has my personal life. But jumping quickly into the purpose of this video, I have had a lot of comments on my rudder fix videos over the last few weeks after the latest update with World Update 11, I think it was, for Canada. When that instance dropped, I got a ton of these comments about my rudder suddenly doesn't work. It gets stuck in one position. It's not functioning and blah, 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 blah. None of it's a negative blah, blah, blah. It's just those are the same type of comments I'm seeing over and over again. I hadn't yet had a chance to fly until yesterday and today, where I was able to get a little bit of time, and I've completed 2 flights, overall compiling about 4 hours of airtime in the A320, which is my favorite airplane to fly right now because I just do a lot of the commercial pseudo simming. So, in my flights, I did not experience a single problem with my rudder or my control surfaces. How did that work out? I don't believe it's because anything I'm doing is massively different, better, or not. I'm using a bog standard Xbox 360 controller that I bought probably 8 to 10 years ago. It just has a regular pack on the back for AA batteries, and that's all I use. My computer, it's not really top of the line anymore. It is a heavily overclocked 5820K from Intel with a 1080 Ti, also heavily overclocked on a custom water loop, 32 gigs of RAM. So the game does struggle a little bit on my 5K resolution that I'm using. But again, it's not my hardware. I don't think it's anything to do with my specs or anything like that. But what I commonly see when looking at this is something in the controls that messes up. Now, I've seen this happen before with a number of updates for me as well, but not so much recently. So let me back out of my hangar here. I'm gonna go over to my options, and the first one, which is usually what goes wrong, is under assistance options. Go under piloting, and you can see this one here for auto rudder. This used to, for me, all the time, every single update would be enabled, and that means that the computer, its AI, is going to try to take control of your rudder, which really doesn't help because it doesn't know what it's doing with the rudder unless you're in the air, and even then it sometimes screws up. So I turn that off. You can see most of mine are all custom aircraft systems. I've got on medium simply because I don't mind mixture and fuel, or just mixture being on there. Fuel is off, everything else. Again, I'm trying to make kind of a pseudo simming setup, not a complete simming, because I do want to do some things myself. Failure and damage, again, customized. I've turned some things off because it didn't work right. Let me turn that. Navigation aids, again, taxi ribbon, just because I can't hear or see in some aspects of the game, depending on the airport. Notifications, I've only got a few things on. The rest I've got pretty much off because it doesn't matter. Piloting, I've got assisted checklist just because I like seeing all the items, especially if I'm in an airplane I'm unfamiliar with. In the A320, I don't even need the checklist after the first 2 or 3 times through it. And I do leave AI comms on by default, though typically when I start up, because I have the pushback mod installed, I disable the AI communications until after I push back, and then I let the autopilot take over and do their job. POIs, again, on medium just because I don't care, and user experience, again, custom. So under piloting, auto rudder, turn that off. Assisted yoke and all that stuff, turn it off. It's likely going to mess with your control systems. You can see anything about assisted in flight controlling is turned off because I've never had it work properly. And since I did that, I stopped having issues. The next big important thing to look at is under controls. Here, you want to make sure your controller is selected. Again, if you're like me using an Xbox controller, select that. If you're using a joystick or a HOTAS or something like that, make sure that is selected. Then you want to go under flight control surfaces and primary control surfaces, and it should be near the top for rudder. Now for the Xbox controller, because we have the 2 triggers hidden here under the right and left buttons, you've got to have the left trigger and right trigger mapped to the correct axis. And depending on what you're using and how, you may want to reverse that axis to it for it to work correctly. So in this case, if I hit my right trigger, I want the rudder to go off to the right, and it's reversed because of the way the joystick and everything would work normally. Elevators up and down, right and left, all that stuff. Some people like reverse axis where you push up and it would move the flight up. To me, that's backwards because I would pull back on the yoke, pushing the joystick controller down or towards my body, pulling it back to me to lift the plane up. So for me, that's more natural. Some people are the opposite, and that's fine, whatever works for you. But you want to make sure your rudder is mapped to the correct system that will work with it. And you can see my rudder axis left wasn't displaying for a moment there because I hadn't yet hit the controls, and it took it a minute to synchronize, get the calibration out of Windows, and then it pulled it. I don't know if you're experiencing any similar issues. I usually, just as part of the fun in playing, will do kind of a test of the rudders and all the control surfaces as I'm waiting for my engines to spool up and prep for taxiing, again, more like a real airplane. That may or may not have any impact on it. The game should synchronize and pick up all your settings as soon as you turn the controller on. Hell, half the time I don't even turn the controller on until I'm waiting for the loading screen to finish to populate me in the game so I can fly. I just don't see the point in turning the controller on when there's no need for it yet. So that is my setup. Now, if you're using a controller or a joystick and your mappings are wrong, over here on the filter, change it from assigned and go to all. And then you can see there's other options down here. Rudder access. This would be your joystick typically. You may be using rudder access right and left, and you would have to rotate the joystick in the correct direction. If you're using rudder pedals, then you would definitely be using the right or left. Otherwise, there is a standard access for more like if you wanted to use one of your joypad buttons here, like this one or this one, and use that to control your rudder. It's perfectly doable. You would just have to configure it in the game to do that. But you also want to make sure if you are using a controller, this is set to the triggers and not the buttons that are on top. Because if you use the buttons, which I just pushed and it backed me out of the menu, then it's an all or nothing. Whereas you can see here, because this is an analog and it's increasing the travel distance to the pole, more power through it, however it's measuring it, you can get it to do that actual registration of on, off, as well as how far you want the rudder to deflect. If you're using the buttons, then it's all or nothing. Just like if you're using brakes or something, then here you can see the button to hold the brakes. You just push and hold, it's all or nothing. It'd be nice if you could map those to other options as well. Maybe pull both triggers at once and suddenly your brakes go on. More like the real airplane, but I'll take what I can get right now. And maybe they even added something like that, but I highly doubt it. Brakes, auto brake left. Yep, they do. Looks like they have brake access. So you can see they do have brake access on here, but I don't have brake pedals. And I'm not going to break the game because it works. So those are the things that I would take a look at first. If you are experiencing any issues with your rudder, that is where I recommend going first. Check the assistance options, make sure that AI rudder control is disabled. Otherwise, check your control options. If everything in the game looks correct, you may need to update your drivers. Windows Update can screw with that as well because my stuff is so old at this point, I don't really have to worry about that as much. You could also potentially, again, if you're using a joystick, you may need to recalibrate your joystick with Windows to make sure that everything's aligned properly and it's not getting screwed up. But I hope that helps some guys figure out what's going on with their games, guys and gals. But anyway, hopefully you can get it sorted and get back on track and have happy flying. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.